Okay, so perhaps we can start with a little bit of background both on yourself, your career to date, and also obviously about Renovotec as a company. That'd be good.
Yeah, certainly. Well, my history was very much the software industry. So I actually started in insurance and went into software by almost by mistake when I was about 23, and stayed in the software industry until it must have been, it was 2009 when I set Renovotec. But yet strange, I didn't get out of software till 2012. And essentially, the Renovotec started as a result of the fact that recognising the software industry that people didn't want to get involved with hardware, which was essentially it was a low margin area. So you had customers that were able to buy the software but couldn't buy the hardware from the same supplier because they didn't see any value in it. So it gave me an opportunity to actually set up a business in Renovotec to actually pick up on that side of the industry. So I actually carried on with our software company until 2012, at which point we exited that and the focus became purely Renovotec.
Okay, and in terms of sort of characterizing the company, I believe you're what we might say is a fast-growing end-to-end technology and services provider for, I think, organizations primarily operating throughout the supply chain. And I think, if I'm right, it's both Europe and the US you have presence. I guess it'd be good just to understand sort of how you've achieved, I guess, from that date you mentioned, how you've achieved it, in terms of what makes you different, and also how I guess you've got a partner ecosystem as well that supports you. So yeah, just the journey of the company, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, essentially in 2009 when we started, it was literally from zero, which was a challenge at the time. We were encouraged by many companies not to even start, but we ignored that good advice and moved ahead anyway. And I would say the growth was relatively steady until about 2012 when we came across a company that we kept on, we paid to offer very similar solutions. And we were at a partner conference in Sorrento in 2013. And I just said to the MD of this company, I said, this can't be good for any of us. We're just duplicating effort. Have you thought about exiting the business? And he said he had given it some thought. And literally by the end of the evening, we'd agreed in principle to buy that business. That company was called Sandpiper. And it was perhaps one of the quickest acquisitions one could imagine. I mean, we did the due diligence and the legals and acquired that business in a matter of months. And it was a real good platform for Renovotec to grow from. And it gave us a taste for acquisitions, despite the fact we'd not really considered it before that. So we swiftly, I'll take away swiftly, but we subsequently acquired another business in 2015, which was a small company and perhaps not a major focus for us. But then 2017 was hugely significant when we acquired a company called Data Trade, which was a specialist in industrial print. And that basically essentially made us market leader in industrial print support in the UK, but also opened up a huge amount of companies that were existing customers on the print side and allowed us to actually develop that data capture solution that we've got. And moving on from the industrial print, we saw that got us into a number of market areas that we'd previously been unsuccessful in. And we then in 2019, we acquired a company called Spirit Data Capture, which got us very much into the area of field data solutions. So whereas we'd been very much within the four walls of the warehouse, this got us into field service, working for energy companies, smart meter installations, and so on and so forth. And again, it was a real good complementary business. So it was very similar product set. So it was very much the industrial print. It was the scanning technology and so on, but in a different market area. After that, 2021, and whether I'm answering the questions clearly as perhaps we might like, in 2021, obviously we'd just come through COVID. I say come through COVID, I mean, it was very alive and well at the same time. But my business partner, he decided that he wanted to exit, and we took on external investment for the first time. And what that did is it basically gave me a war chest to actually go and make some further acquisitions. So in 2021, I decided that we'd strengthen our wireless knowledge. We do an awful lot of wireless networking solutions throughout the country. We bought a company called Digitalisation. We're a Wi-Fi specialist based down in Poole. And we took them on board again, a very rapid acquisition, which made a massive difference to our wireless capabilities. And then not fit with 2021, not quite done. In the Christmas of 2021, we acquired a company called Jade Solutions, and Jade were a specialist in providing data capture and print solutions into the retail and hospitality arena. Again, an area that's perhaps not something where we specialised in. You talk about the countries that we operate in. As of now, we have offices in the UK, which are in fact 3 offices at the moment. We've got an office in Os in the Netherlands, serving that part of Europe. We've got an office in Gothenburg, serving the Nordics. You'll certainly find with the Nordics that they seem to behave a little bit differently to the rest of Europe, and it really suits us having an operation there. We've, in the last month, opened an operation in Norway to complement our Gothenburg, Sweden operation. We have an office in Chicago now, and as of a month ago, we now have an operation in Sydney in Australia and Melbourne. And there's more to come. We are now, in the next few months, we anticipate that we'll have an operation in Ireland, and we're also looking at New Zealand as well. So quite strong coverage, and we're looking to add to that in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, the description, you make it sound all very simple and controlled, but I imagine the reality has been a bit of a roller coaster journey. So I'm just wondering, I mean, presumably you've had to take certain risks along the way, whether it's, the acquisitions, the deciding whether or not to buy. And I'm just interested, have all those sort of risks paid off? And if they haven't, have you sort of learned certain things that have then helped you, subsequently? Just your thoughts as to the risk reward, I guess, in terms of running your business.
Well, they've certainly not all paid off. I'd love to say they had, but the majority most certainly have. And I think that, I guess like any good investor, if you make more right decisions than poor decisions, it will all work out well in the end. And I guess for me, the good and bad decisions tend to be people and businesses, and not quite in equal measure. People, some of the best people I've interviewed in the past have been some of the worst people in execution. You often find salespeople sell themselves better than they sell the product, and it's something to learn over time. But from a business perspective, I guess biggest lesson I've learned is if something starts at a high price and then ends up at a low price, it doesn't mean it's good value. Just because something's overpriced in the first instance. So yes, I did get my fingers burnt a few years ago. I bought a company which started off with quite a high valuation. I wasn't interested at that level. The value then halved, at which point I became interested. And by the time I acquired it, I paid less than 20% of the original asking price. And initially it was very celebratory. It was fantastic. What a bargain we've got. Soon realised it was anything but, and due to dare I say, I won't say lack of due diligence, I would say perhaps naivety in the due diligence, we acquired a business where there'd been a lot of smoke and mirrors, and what we believed we were buying was not exactly what we were getting. And rather than perhaps accept the failure and move on, we threw an awful lot of resource and money to try and fix that, which wasn't necessarily that bad in itself, apart from the fact it took our focus away from the rest of the business. So whilst we continued to create a successful and grow a successful business, in hindsight, if we hadn't have wasted our time and energy on this acquisition, which we shouldn't have made in the first instance, then I believe we'd have actually been in a better place. So yes, I think it's definitely not all been perfect, and it's definitely not all been easy. But if I think of the number of acquisitions we've made, there's only one, and that is the one where I look back and wish I hadn't done it. And I think if I went in with such trepidation to every opportunity, then we wouldn't be where we are. I'm a great believer in moving at pace to get the right deal done. And I look back at when we acquired Data Trade, the sales team there were bemused when we first acquired the business in the fact that they would have an opportunity, they'd go to the MD, he would say, I'll raise it with the board in the board meeting in 3 weeks' time. By the time they'd had the board meeting and decided it was something to pursue, the opportunity had gone. Whereas typically for us, a sales guy can call us say, can we do something? And it'll get an answer within the hour. Nothing of board meetings and passing it round. So yes, there's been a number of mistakes over the years, but I think every time you do make a mistake, I guess it's like America for me. In America, every failure is just another step towards success, and it's not a popular attitude in the UK, but I'm a strong believer in it.
And clearly, you're an entrepreneur even. And I'm just wondering, did you come to that later in your career, or is it something you did at a young age? Whenever you got into entrepreneurship, are there any bits of advice you'd share with other folks, particularly, I suppose, youngsters that might be looking, at doing their own thing? Just any lessons learned or advice you can give?
Yeah, sure. Well, in answer to the question, yes, from a very early start. When my teenage friends had pictures of pop stars on the walls, I had pictures of Wall Street. I was very keen in investing from an early age and found a business. So, yeah, I don't know whether it made me popular with my friends, but when I was 13, 14 years old, I was selling stationery in school, and the cost of the items I sold went up depending on the situation. So you get detention for not having a pen in class, and you could buy a pen off me for 20 pence outside of class, but it's 50 pence inside the class. So it was, I guess it's a bit like the EasyJet model now of surge pricing. So it was early interpretation of that. And then from there, I mean, my biggest success, and it's one that when I tell people, there's always a wry smile or they laugh at this, but I set up a company breeding hamsters. So we called it Log Cabin Hamsters. Set it with a friend. His dad was a carpenter, and he built a huge log cabin for us in the back garden. And we were breeding hundreds of hamsters, which was actually very, very profitable. The feisty little things, they like to bite you. They don't want to be disturbed, and you've got to get just the right conditions, make sure it's the right temperature and so on. And we did that. We got it absolutely perfect. And we were supplying most of the pet shops in West Yorkshire, and making, to the point that when I was 14, my brother's 3 years older than me, and I bought him his first car, which is unusual. He never repaid the favour. So that's very much where I started. And I mean, I still believe I actually set up the first insurance comparison service, which was, I think it was back when I was like 19 years old, so that'd been 1991. Made quite a bit of money out of that, but unfortunately didn't have the capital to push it through. I would say advice to young entrepreneurs: everybody thinks they have to do something new and different, and invariably that's not the case. Invariably it's doing something better. So you tend to find that the majority of successful companies out there weren't the first. They were just the ones that got the model right. And also, don't let the lack of capital put you off. You've got to be brave, you've got to be bold. Beg, borrow, don't steal. But do what you can. But invariably, lack of capital is just an excuse. There's normally a way around it. Just start off very simply.
I'm just wondering on that. I mean, did you always go it alone, or depending on how good you thought the idea, would you involve other partners, as it were, and give equity? I'm thinking of Dragon's Den, where everyone argues about how much equity to give. And I always think, well, if someone's going to help you make it a big idea, don't get greedy as to how little you want to give away, and most you keep. Just your thoughts as to how flexible you would or wouldn't be about those kind of things.
I think in the past I've been very reluctant to give up equity. It's easily given away, and I think it's certainly one to be cautious about. But to the flip side of that, it's better to have 10% of £100,000 than 100% of £1,000. So if you have got an opportunity that is truly scalable, then I think it's definitely something you should consider. The type of Dragon's Dens deals you see, sorry, that's not easy to say, are often retail-based products, and it's all about that distribution model. So if you look at one of our customers, Costa Coffee, they were acquired by Coca-Cola. Great acquisition for both parties. In Coca-Cola's case, they've got one of the best distribution models in the world. So to give up equity, be it part of or all in that case, makes complete sense. So you've got to consider what the other party's bringing to the table. And you've also, when businesses are young, they often fail to consider the likes of shareholder agreements and so on, which is understandable when you've got the excitement of a relatively new business. But if that business does grow, those agreements can very quickly become extraordinarily important. I was very fortunate in the fact that I met my business partner that was partner for 19 years. I met him in a job, so I got to work with him for an employer and recognised how well we worked with each other. And we had a very similar thought process and a desire to succeed and, dare I say, that hard work ethic. And we can genuinely say that in 19 years we didn't have a single argument. But I know from speaking to other big competitors or suppliers, that's actually a very rare situation. So yeah, I mean, equity stakes, where it's right, yes, never give away too much. And when you are bringing third parties into the business, make sure those are people you want to work with. And I would say, even if it's a case of an internet wire for a couple of £100, get those shareholder agreements in place and make sure there's something you can work with going forward.
Yeah, and then if we move our attention back to the supply chain, it'd be good perhaps to understand what you think are the most important issues affecting the supply chain industries at the present time, and also be interested to know if you, I presume, how you work with your customers to help them address them and and create new products or services around those.
Yeah, I mean, labour is the constant challenge at the moment. If you see the increase in national minimum wage, or national living wage, which is coming into play from April, I always have a note for this because I get the maths wrong, but essentially you're looking now at it works out at £124 per 8-hour day once you've taken into account national insurance and minimum pension contributions, and then sickness and holidays and so on. When you get to that number, you start to realise that when you've got one of these distribution centres with hundreds and sometimes some of our customers thousands of staff, it becomes extraordinarily challenging to manage that. So it's very much a case of how do you automate that warehouse? How do you introduce that automation that brings down that labour cost? And a big focus for us at the moment is voice technology, which is, so that's voice picking in particular, which it's got huge benefits to warehouses with large picking labour forces. And then the other aspect is robotics, and indeed voice instruction to pick to a robot. So for a user to be directed to a location by a voice instruction to pick the product, and at the point they pick the product, the robot comes to them and they pick and put it into that robot. They move on to the next location, and the robot may stick with them, or the robot may go to another picker. And in doing this, we've found that we can actually as much as halve the amount of steps that a typical picker does in a day, which is has huge implications for the cost of that labour. And a number of our prospective customers have initially been put off by the upfront cost of, be it robotics or voice. But when you amortise that over a number of years and look at the ever-increasing cost of labour and price into the cost of that labour, the fact that it keeps going up. Once you've made that investment in the robot, that investment's been made. That robot will work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You're not going to get a person doing that with the best one in the world. And the robot, as I say, once you made that investment, it will cost the same next year and the year after. I think we can safely say that minimum wage and indeed national insurance contributions and pension contributions will only be going up. So yeah, that's a massive focus for us, and areas around things like fixed industrial scanning product in and out. Another huge challenge for our customers is returns. I so often see on internet sites people saying, "Oh, what size are these shoes? Are they normal size? Oh, I know what I'll do is I'll buy a size below and a size above and return the 2 pairs I don't need," which sounds great. And it's been a long-standing challenge in the automotive industry. If you're bringing in your BMW 320 for a service and you want the brakes changing, it's not unusual for the motor technician to order 3 sets of brake pads to cover off all the options. and then you've got the problem of returns. So we're very focused on how we can actually make those returns more efficient, how we can actually get them back into your stock quickly, get that visibility of those items, and also avoid fraud. There's a massive attraction to people out there to actually defraud via returns, and it's very easily done at a basic level. One of the most common ones that we see is that you order, for instance, a £30 pair of walking trousers and a £90 pair, and then you fill in a returns form saying you want to return the £90 pair. You return the £30 pair with the barcode switched over. That's received, people are in a rush, they scan it in, you get your £90 credited back, and you've paid £30 for a £90 pair of trousers. So it's things like that to actually like link in with, for instance, weighing devices. So it could be the heavier set of walking trousers, weigh 400 grams, and the cheaper set weigh 250. So by simply receiving that, scanning it, but also doing a weight check as well, can determine whether that's an attempt at fraud. And so on. So yeah, it's I guess it's looking at where our customers have opportunities to save money, where we can protect them from fraud, and generally where we can improve processes.
In terms of, I'm imagining it's very much a two-way process. So you folks will be working on new ideas and solutions, but also, as I say, to your point with that trouser example, if a customer comes to you and say, look, we're getting scammed an awful lot here, can you come and help? You will then work on a solution. Is there a 50-50 balance? Do you think you push out more solutions than customers come to you with? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of our business comes from doing what we call a DC walkthrough, and it commonly applies to a distribution centre, but it can apply to any process that customers are involved with that requires an element of data capture. And to be quite frank, when somebody comes to us and they say they've got a requirement for 30 devices of a particular specification, that doesn't excite us. That's normally someone's decided what they want, they've made that decision, and essentially it's just price checking. What really interests us when a customer says, I've got a problem. Sometimes it's, I've got a problem, I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's a case of I'm having a high level of breakages in my warehouse than I'd expect to. I've got a higher level of staff throughput, so people leaving the business. It can be that my costs exceed the income. How do I make this a profitable operation? Areas like that excite us. We go in, we film processes, so we'll actually film them, we'll time them, and then we'll bring in, we'll do a proof of concept from one of the technologies that we use, and then go through filming that process again, measure that, and then we can actually show to the client the time that they can save by bringing in one of these processes. And then we basically put into monetary terms. And we went through a process with one of the retailers, which was around asset control. So it was basically asset cabinets, which allowed them to get their data capture devices out to their staff sooner and reduce breakages. And we were showing a return on investment of less than 9 months on something that will last them well in excess of 10 years. So that's where our real interest lies.
And in terms of the year ahead, do you know or anticipate what types of equipment and technology investment, there's going to be an increase of interest in investment, any particular sort of trends that you're preparing for or you already know are out there?
Mm-hmm. There's a number. We're seeing a massive increase in the interest in fixed industrial scanning, particularly around areas like packing benches and so on. So rather than the user having to pick up a handheld scanner to scan a package, it's a case of swiping it under a very high performance industrial scanner, which will scan in an instant. It massively improves packing processes. So that's definitely something that we're going to spend a lot of time on. Voice, we had our best ever year with voice technology last year, particularly the Honeywell voice solutions. Were, I believe, one of the fastest growing partners in Europe, providing those solutions, and we're now introducing it into the Americas and Australia. So that's going to be very significant for us. Other areas, we're working with a partner company called Falcona, who produced a mobile packing bench that can be taken around the warehouse. That's with a Honeywell printer and Zebra scanner on there, and lasts for a full shift. And that basically gives people a lot of flexibility. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of different solutions that we're working on, constantly bringing new ones into the mix. And yeah, I mean, it was only a couple of years ago, we worked with one of our big FMCG customers to put scanning on the forklift truck. So it gave them actual scanners on the actual forks themselves, and that reduced, if I recall correctly, reduced their picks to lorry, so filling a lorry, by about 16 minutes per lorry in a very fast-moving environment. So areas like that, we produce a solution or provide a solution for one customer, and then we go out and find other customers that have a similar situation where we can bring value to it.
And you referenced sort of robotics and automation a little bit earlier, but I'm wondering, are there sort of further advances? Is it just a question of the solutions are there and it's time for customers to understand them and deploy them, implement them, or are there going to be even more advances when it comes to robotics and automation that people need to be understanding as well?
There's definitely going to be many advances in robotics. At the moment, it feels a bit like the Wild West. There's an awful lot of companies out there with solutions, a lot of new startups from the Far East. A lot of it, they've got the physical robots, but they don't have the correct software to manage them. So we've produced our own version of our middleware, which provides a link between those robots and the warehouse management system. But you're seeing improvements in the same way you are with, for instance, electric cars. You're seeing improvements in battery performance. You're seeing improvements in the weight that these robots can pick. There's customers that want, for instance, being able to tow existing totes. So they don't want to invest in new totes, which a lot of the robots do require. So yeah, there's a significant investment in that area by the different robotic companies. I expect we'll see a number of mergers over the coming years. Regrettably, some will fail. They can't all possibly succeed. But yeah, there's I guess the fact that in the past, when you wanted to introduce robotics to a warehouse, you were talking about an Ocado style dark warehouse with a 50 million plus investment. And now you've got individual robots that you can introduce at maybe £30,000 a robot, and providing you've got a relatively usable warehouse floor, then you can literally bring them in one robot at a time. And I think that's the biggest change from a robotic perspective. You don't have to go out and spend millions of pounds. You can actually introduce robots to just parts of the operation. And some of our customers, they just want to bring in a robot just to manage waste. So just to have a robot going around essentially doing a milk run up and down the warehouse, stopping at certain points, and people just putting rubbish in there. And just that alone, I know for a fact there's a number of customers where that has just taken one person out of the cost. And straight away, when they reverting back to the costs I mentioned for a single individual, and never mind the fact that people by their very nature can be ill, it makes a massive difference. And I would encourage anybody out there who's interested in robotics to do just that. Start with one. And from our perspective, because we're, as far as I'm aware, the only company in the country that rents robots, you could actually rent one for a couple of months, see how you get on with it. If it doesn't work, we'll take it back.
And I'm just wondering, have we got to the stage? Because I mean, fun enough, early part of my career, I worked on a sort of storage and handling magazine. So high bay warehouses and AGVs and stuff like that, they were around then, but there were reliability problems to a certain extent. Have we now got to the stage where everyone accepts that robotics and automation are pretty much reliable, etc.? So or do you still encounter the odd person that's still a little bit nervous at replacing some humans with a robot that they perhaps don't trust?
I think if you look back to those early days, and like yourself, been around for a good while now and involved in that industry, one of the early companies I worked with that put in a full automated warehouse, I remember we came in one morning and it had tried to shove pallets out through the loading bay door, which was shut, doing significant damage to the loading bay door. So yes, you saw that. There was the well-publicised story of Ocado where one of the robots set on fire and then basically went around the warehouse lighting other parts of the warehouse, and the fire brigade said it was perhaps the best arsonist they've ever come across. It was like the perfect fire. A perfect fire if you want to see your warehouse go up in flames. So yeah, people are right, I guess, to be cautious. We don't want to get to a Terminator situation. But the fact is, certainly the robots we do, they don't fail en masse. Yes, a unit can fail. They run on poly wheels. A wheel can wear out. But these are very clever devices. Invariably, we know you've got a problem before you do. So we can actually get to it and fix it before it's out of use. But it's a very, very different world to the type of fully automated warehouses we talk about. But on that, for all we don't do with those fully automated warehouses, they've become extraordinarily reliable as well. It's, as you probably recall, they are for very specific user cases. They're much better when it's a uniform product and so on. Whereas the type of robots we're talking about typically aren't replacing pickers, they're complementing pickers. And it's getting to that stage where if you can reduce your labour requirement by 50% with a flexible robot force, you can tune up, tune down. We can bring in additional robots at peak time and so on. It does make a significant difference to the performance of an operation.
And a bit of future gazing. If we were to have this conversation, I don't know, 5 years from now, what would a smart warehouse look like then, as opposed to what do you see? How different will the world be in 5 years' time when it comes to smart warehouses?
Robots will be massively part of that, but I think the key change that we're seeing is that the massive increase in the cost of labour in the last 5 years is giving companies the view that they should look at technology again, where perhaps they dismissed it. So when people did the ROI 5 years ago and it didn't add up, they're doing it now and it is adding up. So technologies such as voice, which are significantly more expensive than more traditional scanning technologies, are now starting to come into the fore. So the idea of actual having voice instruction, the idea of somebody getting onto a forklift truck and rather than just assuming it's safe, being forced by a voice unit to actually confirm that the tyres are correctly inflated, that the safety is correct on that vehicle. These areas are definitely going to be parts of the warehouse of the future, not just for big warehouses, not just for the big distribution centres run by the big retailers. We're talking about small to medium enterprises, but robotics and industrial scanning have got to be key to that, and bring these technologies together. None of them run at the best independently. So where you can bring these technologies together, and as I mentioned earlier, to actually pick to a robot using a voice picking instruction, and then we've seen how we can get this to a speed which is absolutely extraordinary. And the robots are so clever; they've got so many different cameras. So people say, "Oh, I don't want the health and safety risk of one of these robots, hitting a pedestrian." Doesn't happen. They've got emergency stopping. They've got cameras all around, but they do work in tandem with pickers very well. So yeah, I see that. I think every customer that does, every company that does packing will certainly have packing bench technology with these fixed industrial scanners in place, and the likes of the mobile workstations that we've mentioned. So it's all these areas where you can actually reduce that labour cost, reduce the risk of fraud, and essentially improve performance.
And in terms of that future, what I guess a good place to finish would be what next? What's in the what plans can you share in terms of Renovotec? Where are you going next? More of the same? You've got other things in the pipeline. Whatever you can share.
I would say again, we'll talk about the massive growth areas for us. We've introduced a product called Guardian. Guardian is a monitor that monitors your handheld devices, your wireless network, your industrial printers, your robots, and so on. And I mentioned earlier about the fact that we spot a problem before you've got one. The common situation we found ourselves in for many years is that your printer fails, you call us, and within 4 hours an engineer's on site, which is expensive for us and it's expensive for the customer. Now what's happening is we're becoming aware that a problem is going to occur, and we're calling the customer and saying we'd like an engineer to visit next Tuesday at 10 a.m. and we're getting there before the device breaks. The customer doesn't see that downtime, and from a selfish perspective, it's a lot easier for us to manage resource ahead of schedule rather than responding to essentially an emergency call. So our Guardian allows us to actually manage all these devices out in the field and in the warehouse. It allows us to manage the Android version. It allows us to manage patches for security, and it allows us to make adjustments to wireless networks and so on. Monitor problems where a wireless network starts to fail. So that's very much where our focus is. We've had huge growth in the last 12 months. There's been a significant amount of enthusiasm at the start of this year as well. So yeah, that's definitely our focus for the year.
Okay, we covered a lot of ground, some brilliant insights into both your own career and what's going on at the company as well. So Richard, really appreciate your time. Thank you.